Welcome to this tutorial. In this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to use Kontakt libraries as standalone and in your DAWs, and also how to set it up, fix common problems, and optimize it for performance. So when you open your Kontakt, you might have this view, or it might take you to this option tab where you have to set your audio drivers and MIDI. Now, to set your audio drivers is quite very simple. I prefer using ASIO when I'm using it as a standalone like this. So yeah, I can change this to ASIO and change my device settings to Focusrite USB ASIO. Now for the ASIO configuration, I won't change anything. For the sample rate for this project, I won't be changing it because it's going to affect what I'm recording. Same with the latency. To change your sample rate and latency, you have to just look for your audio interface, device setting, or UMC control in the case of Behringer. So for Focusrite, you have it as device setting. So when you open your device settings, you'll be able to make certain changes to your sample rate and latency. Now, this is the Focusrite device settings. I won't be changing the sample rate because I'm recording with this audio interface, and this is the buffer size, and this is the clock source and everything. I'll leave the settings same because I don't want to mess with what I'm actually recording. So that's how you go about your audio settings. Then another thing you want to pay attention to is your MIDI. Now, for depending on what MIDI you have connected, I have my Oxygen Pro 49 connected, so I just have to switch it to port A. Now that have been set up already. So you want to set it as port 8. Now it's important to know that. So once you set it as port A, it's important to note that if it is not switching to port A, it means that probably the MIDI is currently used in another software, probably in your DAW. So you have to actually take it off, switch it off on your DAW so it can actually work as a standalone on Kontakt. So after you've set your audio and MIDI settings, you might want to close this for now. So when you open yours like this, yours might be blank and you might not see any library here because Kontakt haven't scanned anything. So what you want to do is to go to options, and when you go to options, go to libraries. Mine is already there because I've scanned it already. Now if you want to scan your library, there are two ways. Now if you click on this launch library 2, it will take you to a place where you could actually scan those libraries. Now, if it doesn't show you this Kontakt library tools, there's another way you can go about it. So what you're going to do is to go to your local disk. On your local disk, you go to program files. Now, that's why it's good to know where you store things. When you go to your program files, you want to scroll till you see native instrument Kontakt. Then you see this application button. You will use this Kontakt button in case yours is showing you native access error. This happens most times when you're probably using Kontakt in a DAW and you want to access the library tool. So this is one way to go about it to find the same library tool. Now, before you add library on Kontakt, you want to organize all those libraries into a particular folder in native instrument so that it's easy to scan things and it's easy to locate things when Kontakt shows you error when loading those documents. Now, on most times, native instrument will be stored in document. So you click on it. When you click on it, you can see inside that my native instrument, I have stored something titled VST. Now, inside that VST is where I have all the libraries I have in. So you want to do that and keep every of your library inside a particular folder in native document so that it is easy for you to find things, and it's also easy for Kontakt to locate that folder. So once you've done that, you want to come to Add Library. Now, when you click on Add Library, it will take you down to your PC folder and ask you to go to where those files are. Because I already know that it's in document, I'll click on document and go to native instrument. Then I'll select this folder. So immediately I click OK, it will scan those folders and tell me the amount of libraries that have been added. So as simple as that. So once you've done that, you can now easily close this library. Then you will find those libraries that you have added over here. So you can now then come to close. So before I proceed, let me cover certain features on this Kontakt 7. On Kontakt 6, there might be slight difference in the interface, but the principles remain the same. Now, for this file, when you click on File, it will take you to these options where you can make certain settings, in which will be coming further into this. We've covered for audio, MIDI, and libraries. So let me close this for now. Then if you come down again, you see where you can close Kontakt, that is exit Kontakt. So here's the volume for this Kontakt as standalone, though each instrument will still have volumes, but this is a general volume here. Now, if we move to file, now when you come to this file, you have new instrument bank, but one thing that is very important is this load. Now, for example, there are certain scenarios where Kontakt might not scan a library and show it to you in Kontakt Player, but the library is functional. So what you could do is to come to load. Now, when you click on load, you can easily go to native instrument, go to the VST, let's say Syntage 1.4. Then on the instrument, you can just load the NKI file. So you can just click on this NKI, it's going to load the file for you in case you don't have it over here. So that's one thing about Kontakt. So moving on, load recent. Now, when you come to load recent, you will see various libraries you've opened recently. You see save multi, save default. I don't really use most of all of these. Now, if you scroll down again, you see this option tab, with the shortcut F12. Now, so you have various places where you could locate that option tab. You could locate it from the file at the top, or you can come to the file here again to find it. So you see the option tab again. So that's that for the option tab. So your library will look like this. This is how Kontakt will most times look like when you first open it. To change it to this other style you saw earlier on, all you have to do is to come here and click on this cancel, close content browser. Now, when you close content browser, it might show you like this, but don't worry. You can come here and put the side pane on. So once you put the side pane, you see those things by the side. So if you go to single view, it will show you just like this. If it's on single view, you can just switch it back to rack view. Now, I prefer it this way because it's easier to see visual of each instrument and it's quicker to load it. So now when you come to this view, on this view, you can see your zoom option where you can reduce the size. If Kontakt is too big for your screen, you can reduce it to 75% and it's going to reduce the size, but I'm okay with 100%. So quick load option is here where you could put instrument for quick load, but I do not recommend this because sometimes it eats a lot of CPUs. So now that you've gotten your library now to show in Kontakt, the next thing you want to do is to load. Now to load it, I've showed you with the first tool where you go to File, then you go to Load, then you look for the file and load in NKI. But with this view, it's easier. All you have to do is to scroll down and double click or drag. So whichever works for you, you can either drag or double click. But for me, I most times double click. I hardly drag, but anyone works for you, works fine. So you have to wait a bit depending on how good your system is. It might load faster than this, but mine takes time. Now, when Kontakt opens, you will see something at the top here, loading. Now, it's very important you allow that stuff load before you start playing, because it tends to cause one or two issues when it has not fully loaded and you are playing one or two things. Now, this default sound has loaded. So if I play something, you will see it's moving here. So once I play, you can see it moving here. So this is also a general volume here, where you could use to adjust things plus or minus. Here is where you can access small settings. So what I do tell people, if you don't know what you are doing, leave these settings alone. So this is just how to easily load Kontakt instrument. Now the next part will be focusing on some of the problems you might encounter when loading Kontakt. So the first one is this library issue in which I covered, where you try to launch library tools and it's telling you native access error. You can access Kontakt as a standalone and see if that issue still persists, because I noticed that sometimes it happens when using Kontakt in a DAW. So if it doesn't solve the problem, like I said earlier on, you can go to your program files in your local disk and look for the Kontakt button, or search it on your toolbar, or going to where you installed Kontakt and look for the Kontakt button. So that's the first problem, how to fix library not showing up like this in rack view. The second problem that might persist is after scanning the library, it is not showing on this rack view like this. Now you have two options. First of all, which is to go to load and load it manually. Or better still, maybe the problem is a simple problem. Probably Kontakt is not having the image to display. So I will explain that. Now, if you noticed in this Syntage 1.4, for example, I had to add what is known as wallpaper PNG file. Now, sometimes if this wallpaper PNG file is mixing, Kontakt might not show that instrument in rack view. So what you want to do is to go to the internet, search that particular library wallpaper, download it and include it in where the folder is. And that should fix the problem for you. So I think that's what I did for this Syntage 1.4. I'm not sure. Once you've added the wallpaper, the next thing you want to do is to just rescan the library, and that should fix the problem. So you can see, I think I added that and I have the Syntage 1.4 wallpaper here. So the next thing is fixing sound problems. Now, in which I've covered extensively in the first part, where you have to check your audio driver to be sure that you're using the proper audio for your interface, or if you're not using an interface, the normal ASIO. Also, you want to check your MIDI. You want to put it in port A. This is if you're using Kontakt as standalone. So if you also be using some other things like controls in your MIDI, you want to turn off this MIDI 3 on. Now, like I said, also, if you are using it as a standalone, you have to deactivate the MIDI from probably DAW or any other application using that MIDI at the moment, so that it can actually appear here and also work. Now, the next thing is Kontakt showing errors when loading a sample library. Now, let's say, for example, I want to load this library. Now, you could see these errors is Kontakt is showing files not found. So what you can easily do is to go to browse folder manually. Do not use search file system. So you click on it, go to where that file is. For example, this is it here. Then you click OK. Kontakt will scan it and fix audio error. That's another error people do have. So you have to wait patiently and allow it to load. So when it has loaded, it will look like something like this. If you want to see the keyboard, you might just activate it under view, but the keyboard is not really nice, so I always deactivate it. And this quick load, if you want it to show, you can just show it here, but most times I deactivate it. So once it loads, you can now play whatever you want to play. So if you want to show the live keyboard, you can just show the keyboard like this, and if you don't like it, you can just remove it like that. So that's that to do that. So to remove a library, you just click on this cancel. You ask it, do you want to save changes made to the instrument? I'll click no. Now I'll be opening another library because it's prone to another error. Okay, now it's important when you're loading a library, try not to press things too fast. So once you're loading something, allow it to load before you do any other thing so that your Kontakt doesn't hang. Now, once you load a library and the library control doesn't have markers to show you what you're doing, there's a guide here below that shows you whatever you do for some controls like that. So it shows you 0 dB and all of that. So it doesn't show for all. It only most times shows for those that doesn't really have indications here to let you know what you're actually doing. Okay, so let's say you load Kontakt and probably you play a song. You're probably hearing echo. You could fix some of this problem by going to the settings here, and some of them will have their delay button, and you can just turn off the delays, and that should probably fix the issue for you for the delays. You understand? So you could mess around the compression and also the reverb settings if it's too much for you. So that's that about fixing some Kontakt problems. Now the next thing is optimizing for CPU and audio performances. Now when you load Kontakt, the first thing you want to do is to drop down this volume if it's too much. Now some VSTs are just too much, and when it's too much like that, it leads to clipping. And when it leads to clipping, the first thing you want to be hearing is click and pops. So you want to drop down the volume a bit if it's too loud. So that's the first thing you want to do. Then you want to play around. So you want to play around that. So if you're still hearing clicks and pops, you want to raise your buffer size up a bit. And you can find that in your Focusrite device settings. You can just adjust that, take it up. I won't be taking that up for this because I'm recording with this. So if you're still experiencing click, you can do that, increase your buffer size. Now there's another problem, which is CPU problem, where it tells you CPU is full. As a result of that, your sound is cut off abruptly. So one way you can actually fix this is to go to your options. Then now I'll be going to how I do my own setup. Now for the first thing you have here is your interface. You won't be doing anything with that. Then here you have NG. Now what you want to do is to first of all disable this CPU overload. You understand? Disable it. So for this multi-core processor standalone, most times I turn it off. Yeah, you want to turn that off, especially when I'm using it in DAW. I turn that off straight up. Now, send MIDI to outside world, choose options. So most times I don't really do anything here. Offline interpolation quality for mixed down. So same as read time, you want to leave that there. Store edited samples and all of that. I don't really touch any of all these things here. Now, the next thing is handling. Now use computer keyboard for MIDI playback. I leave this the way it is. Solo mode in place. Show files folder. I don't really mess around this part. Then loading. I just leave these loading areas just like it is. I don't really mess around with all this part. So this is my setup. I just leave it like that. The libraries, I've covered it. Now the next one is memory. Now this is where it is important. Kontakt default buffer size is mostly 30. Now if you're using this 30, sometimes you experience what is known as CPU full and whatever, or CPU overload, then your sound cut out. So you want to experiment with this. I've experimented with 60 and I discovered for me 90 works better for me and makes things run smooth, depending on some libraries. Some libraries will work comfortably with 30 kb, while some 60. So but for me, I discovered that 90 is much more stable. So if you're having that CPU issue where Kontakt tell you CPU overload and it stops your sound abruptly, the solution is to go to your memory and increase this override instrument preload size higher to about 90 kb or 60, depending on what works for you. So you want to experiment with it and see what works well with your system. Now this developer option, you leave it like that. Usage data, I just leave it like this. I don't mess around with that. So I close that. So another thing you want to take note is that if you are using a library, depending on your system, that have the ability to use about 4 voices. Now, if you notice that you're having clicks and pops, you want to try to reduce those voices to about 2 or even 1, depending. Let's say you're using it for a live performance, you want to try to keep it to about 2 so that Kontakt can work very well and your CPU can also be very, very effective. Now, if your CPU can run 4, fine. If it can run 3, fine. But most times 2 is always much more stable, especially for libraries like synthesis libraries that you have 4, but they are very, very heavy. So you can just reduce the number of voices and that should actually fix the problem. Now, lastly, we'll be going into how to use it in DAW settings. Now I have covered every settings. Now these settings you can see here are the same settings that's going to be in my DAW. So let me just close this. Now for DAW is the same thing. You want to check your audio settings, make sure you're using the right audio driver. On your MIDI settings, you want to select your MIDI, which is the proper thing you want to do. We are going to be using knobs and co. You could activate this MIDI in 3 depending on how your MIDI is configured anyway. So you want to set that. So depending on which DAW you are using, you want to search for Kontakt, let's say Kontakt 7, then you want to load it. Now when you're loading it, try not to press too much. Once you load it once, let it load before you do something else. Now once it has loaded, you have it just like this again. So here I'll be covering the 2 last problems you might encounter. Let's say I want to load this first instrument. Once Kontakt has loaded, you will see another thing loading here. So you want to also allow that load before you start playing anything on Kontakt, or else you might experience glitches, clicks and pops. So you have to be patient. Depending on how your CPU is, it's going to determine how fast it's going to load. So you want to take note of that. So once the first one finishes loading, it's going to be loading the samples, you understand, depending on the library. It will determine how fast it's going to load. So you want to be patient, because if you press something while this might load, it might make it hang or cause issues. So allow it to load the samples before you press everything. So it has finished loading the samples, then I can now play whatever I want to play actually. So if you go back to our options, when we go to memory, you see it's the same settings here. So for the engine, you can see my multi-core processor is actually turned off. For me, it works best. My Kontakt works best for instruments this way. So you could actually replicate the settings for yours. Now lastly, there's something you must take note of. When you're using certain libraries, it tends, whenever you open the library again, sometimes it doesn't really load that particular instrument again. So one thing you want to do is, probably whenever you use a particular sound in a Kontakt library, like for example, maybe I'm using this MKS20, I try as much as possible to name that library, the name, with the name of the instrument. What do I mean? For example, if this is MKS20 I'm using, or if it's a piano sound, I will just come here and rename it to that particular thing, so that in case I open Kontakt and probably something happened, it doesn't load that instrument or something of such just happened, with that name, I'm able to locate that particular sound again and let everything function normally. Now, lastly, when you're working with Kontakt in a project and you'll be using a lot of Kontakt, it's important there's what we call in FL consolidate, and some other DAWs it is called bounce, while some other DAW it is called freeze. So you want to actually freeze those tracks to change it to audio, or else you'll be having serious CPU issues. So on FL is consolidate track. So I believe with that you should be able to fix every Kontakt problem you might experience, and by now you should be able to use the Kontakt software. So thank you for watching.